New CEO cut my salary by 20% after 12 years of loyalty. I stayed calm, resigned, and joined their biggest competitor. 9 weeks later, their network collapsed. Carriers walked nationwide. $8.4 million in operational losses. Grab a snack because this one's long. Name's Dominic, 36, male. My wife Jules has this saying she uses whenever I come home looking like someone ran over my soul. She'll pour herself some tea, look at me with those big brown eyes and say, "All right, walk me through it. Start from the dumb part." That phrase has gotten me through 12 years at Polaris Biogistics, cold chain pharma logistics. Sounds boring until you realize one slip-up means medications that don't work, lawsuits that definitely do, and people who might actually die. A 2 degrees re-temperature excursion for 4 hours can destroy a shipment worth more than most people's houses. And unlike regular shipping where a late package means an annoyed customer, a late pharma package can mean a transplant patient doesn't get their immunosuppressants. No pressure, right? I figured out early that I had a brain for this stuff. It was 2012, my second year at Polaris, and a power failure hit our Memphis distribution center during a brutal July heat wave. We had $1.8 million worth of biologics sitting in a facility with no functioning climate control. Temperature climbing fast. Everyone was running around like headless chickens. The operations VP was sweating through his shirt, screaming into his phone at the utility company like that would somehow restore power faster. I grabbed a corridor map and started making calls. Within 4 hours, I'd rerouted everything salvageable to Nashville through a carrier contact I'd been quietly building a relationship with. Coordinated dry ice emergency delivery from 3 different suppliers, arranged backup generator transport from a rental company in Arkansas, saved about $1.4 million in product that would have been destroyed by morning. The VP took full credit in the quarterly report. My name didn't appear anywhere. I didn't care. I knew what I could do. More importantly, I knew what I was becoming. My buddy Terrence, who ran the Memphis floor back then, watched the whole thing go down. He's this big guy with a loud laugh and zero filter. Afterward, he walked up to me with this look on his face like he just witnessed a magic trick. "My man," he said, shaking his head slowly, "you just saved more money in 4 hours than I'll make in 5 years. And you did it while eating a granola bar." I shrugged. It was a good granola bar. That became our thing. Every time I pulled off something ridiculous, Terrence would find me afterward and rate the snack I happened to be eating during the crisis. It sounds stupid, but those moments kept me sane. The work was invisible. Nobody outside the industry understood what I actually did, but Terrence got it. Jules loved Terrence, called him my work husband. Terrence called her the real boss of my life, which wasn't wrong. Over 12 years, I became the guy who knew everything at Polaris Biogistics. I knew every temperature corridor in our network, knew which carriers had reliable refrigerated units and which ones were running on prayers and duct tape. Knew that the I-40 corridor through Arizona becomes a death trap for cold chain during summer months because the ambient heat overwhelms standard insulation faster than most people realize. Knew that any shipment running through the Midwest during tornado season needed contingency protocols that could activate within minutes. I built predictive models that tracked weather patterns, equipment failure rates, and carrier reliability across every region we served. When a vaccine shortage hit in 2021, my system rerouted distribution in real time to prioritize HENA areas. Hospitals got what they needed. Kids got vaccinated. The work was invisible until something went wrong. And things rarely went wrong because I was paying attention. That was the frustrating part of my job. Success meant nobody noticed you existed. By year 8, I was director of cold chain operations, overseeing expansion from 3 distribution centers to 7 major hubs and 19 satellite facilities. I handpicked my regional managers personally, trained them on my systems, built them into a network that could respond to problems faster than most companies could identify them. I never asked for much, didn't backstab my way up any ladder, just did the job, did it well, and went home to Jules every night. We'd have dinner together. She'd ask about my day. I'd tell her about whatever fire I'd put out. She'd say something like, "Sounds like they'd fall apart without you." I'd shrug, probably. Neither of us knew how true that would turn out to be. Our old CEO, Richard, understood operations. He'd started in warehouse management 30 years ago, worked his way up the hard way. He walked the floor regularly, knew people's names, respected the ones who made the machine actually work. When he announced his retirement in early 2023, I was cautiously optimistic. The board had been making noises about fresh leadership and modern perspectives for years. I figured we'd get some polished MBA type who would make us sit through pointless strategy sessions and mandatory team-building exercises, but would ultimately leave operations alone because they knew they didn't understand it. What I didn't expect was Victoria Marsh. The meeting request landed in my calendar at 6:50 p.m. on a Monday, scheduled for 8:10 a.m. Tuesday. That weirdly specific time should have been my first warning sign. I barely slept that night. Jules noticed. She always did. You're tossing around like crazy. She mumbled into her pillow around 2 a.m. What's going on? Weird meeting tomorrow. Not sure what it's about. She rolled over and looked at me in the dark. What kind of weird? Honestly, I don't know yet. That's what's bugging me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, well, either way, you'll handle it. You always do. I walked into the executive wing the next morning with that conversation replaying in my head. The hallway felt different. Quieter than usual. Tenser. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes when I passed her desk. Victoria was already seated when I entered the conference room. Perfectly pressed blazer, manicured nails tapping the glass table in a rhythmic pattern that could have been impatience or boredom or both. She didn't stand when I walked in, didn't offer a handshake, just looked at me like I was an item on her to-do list she was about to check off. Next to her sat Owen, the CFO she'd imported from some retail chain known for gutting operational staff to boost quarterly numbers. He had that uncomfortable look people get when they know something bad is about to happen. His pen was already poised over a notepad, ready to document whatever unpleasant business was about to go down. Victoria skipped the pleasantries, slid a manila folder across the glass table toward me. I opened it, read the first page, felt my stomach drop. 20% salary reduction, effective immediately. The explanation was buried in corporate jargon: compensation realignment to market standards, industry benchmarking analysis, strategic cost optimization initiative. But strip away the buzzwords and the message was obvious. They thought I was overpaid. They thought someone cheaper could do what I did. The analysis shows your compensation is significantly above market average for your role, Victoria said. Her voice had that smooth, condescending tone people use when they've already decided you're beneath them and are just going through the motions of a conversation. I looked up from the folder. Market average for what exactly? She blinked. Apparently, she'd expected me to just accept this quietly, to nod along and thank her for the opportunity to keep my job at reduced pay. For logistics operations directors in the pharmaceutical distribution sector, I almost laughed. The market average you're citing covers single facility directors, warehouse managers overseeing maybe 50 people and regional delivery coverage, not nationwide cold chain networks with FDA compliance requirements, temperature-critical biologics worth millions, and specialized carrier relationships that took a decade to build. Her eyes hardened. I'm sure your contributions are valuable, but the board has approved this adjustment. It's not a negotiation. Owen jumped in with his practiced, sympathetic voice. We've paired the adjustment with performance-based incentives tied to cost-saving initiatives. There's real upside potential here. So, they wanted to cut my base pay by 20% and then make me earn it back by finding more ways to cut costs in a system I'd already optimized over 12 years. And if I don't accept, I asked, kept my voice level. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Then we'd need to explore alternative staffing solutions. People who can execute similar responsibilities at a more sustainable cost level. There it was, the threat wrapped in corporate packaging. Accept the cut or we'll replace you with someone cheaper. As if 12 years of knowing every detail about this place could be swapped out like a printer cartridge. You'll have my decision by Friday, I said. Her eyebrows rose slightly. She'd expected capitulation, immediate acceptance, maybe some grateful hand-wringing about how I understood the company's position. We'd prefer to resolve this today, she said. The adjustment needs to be implemented across the division, and delays create complications. I'm sure they do. I stood up. But you'll have my decision Friday. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard Owen whisper something too quiet to make out. Victoria's response was loud enough to catch. He'll come around. They always do when they realize they have nowhere else to go. Yeah, we'd see about that. I didn't go straight home after that meeting. Drove around for a while instead, trying to process what had just happened. Ended up parked at some overlook on the edge of town, staring at nothing while my brain ran in circles. 12 years of building something that kept people's medications viable. 12 years of preventing disasters nobody ever saw because I caught them before they happened. And they wanted to cut me by 20% because some spreadsheet said I was above average. When I finally walked through the door, Jules was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at my face and put down the spatula. That bad? I sat down at the kitchen table, told her everything. Jules listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. I need to figure out our financial situation first. See how long we can survive if I walk away without something else lined up? She nodded. Okay, let's look at the numbers together after dinner. Figure out where we actually stand. This is why I married this woman. No panic, just practical next steps and confidence that we'd figure it out together. The numbers weren't great. We had savings, but not enough to float indefinitely. The mortgage, car payments, insurance, everything added up faster than either of us liked to admit. We could manage for maybe 4 months without income. 5 if we cut everything to the bone and survived on rice and anxiety. There's another option, I said, hating the words even as they came out of my mouth. I could ask my family. Jules looked at me carefully. She knew my history with them. My older brother, Wade, had inherited our father's share of the family car dealership. They'd always looked at my career choice like it was a phase. I'd never asked them for anything. Not once in 15 years. If you think that's the right move, Jules said carefully. I tried. Drove to my mother's house the next evening. WDE's truck was already in the driveway. My mother offered me coffee. I said, no thanks. Wade was sprawled on the couch like he owned the place. I kept it simple. Explained the situation at work, the salary cut, the job hunt, asked if they could help with a short-term loan until I landed somewhere new. Wade laughed before I even finished talking. So, the big pharma genius finally comes crawling back, he said. What happened to your fancy career being the smart play? It's a temporary situation. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a loan. Right, a loan. He made air quotes. And what happens when Jules figures out she married a guy who can't even keep a job? You think she's going to stick around while you figure your life out? I looked at my mother. She was studying her cup like it held the secrets of the universe. Said nothing. That's not going to happen. I said, sure it's not. Wade leaned forward. Face it, little brother. You picked the wrong path. Should have stayed in the family business like Dad wanted. But no, you had to go prove something. How's that working out for you? I waited another few seconds. Gave my mother one more chance to say something. Anything. She didn't. I stood up. Thanks for your time. That's it. Wade called after me. You're just going to leave? Classic. Always running from reality. I didn't respond. Just walked out the front door and drove home. Jules was waiting when I got back. How'd it go? About how you'd expect. She was quiet for a moment. Then I never liked Wade anyway. His cologne smells like desperation and hair gel. I laughed for the first time in 2 days. Genuine laughter that cracked something loose in my chest. All right, she said. So, we do this the hard way. You start looking for jobs tomorrow. I'll pick up extra hours at the clinic. We figure it out together. You sure? She took my hand. Dominic, we've been doing things together for 9 years. This isn't any different. It's just a bigger problem. And we're pretty good at problems. I went back to work thinking I could survive there until I found something else. Keep my head down. Do my job. Use the time to job hunt quietly. That plan lasted exactly 6 days. It started with small humiliations. My regular parking spot, the one I'd had for 8 years, was suddenly reassigned to Owen without any explanation. My office got moved from the 4th floor to a windowless storage room near the loading docks, right next to the forklift charging station. My access to certain systems was temporarily restricted pending the compensation resolution. Terrence noticed immediately when he saw my new accommodations. Dude, they moved you next to the forklift charging station. That hum is going to make you lose your mind within a week. I've seen it happen already on day 4. I said, I've started having dreams about beeping. In the dreams, the beeps are trying to tell me something important, but I can never quite understand what. That's dark, man. But the real humiliation came on day 6. Victoria called an all-hands operations meeting. Unusual since she normally avoided the operations floor like it might get dirt on her designer clothes. I walked in and found every regional manager, every floor supervisor, every logistics coordinator packed into our largest conference room. Terrence stood in the back and gave me a look that said, something bad is coming. Victoria stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation behind her. The title slide read, Operational Excellence, A New Direction. I want to talk about the future of Polaris operations. She began specifically about bringing in fresh perspectives to modernize our approach and eliminate the inefficiencies that have been holding us back. Inefficiencies. She was talking about systems that had prevented millions in losses. Systems I'd built effective immediately. I'm pleased to announce that we've brought in a consultant who will be overseeing our operational restructuring. Many of you may know him from his previous industry work. Please welcome Garrett. A guy in his early 30s walked in. Slick suit, confident smile, handshake ready posture. I'd heard of Garrett. Everyone in cold chain circles had heard of him. 3 years ago, his recommendations cost a competitor $4 million in spoiled inventory and triggered an FDA investigation. Everyone in the industry knows his name for the wrong reasons. And now he was standing in our conference room about to restructure our operations. Garrett will be working closely with all of you, Victoria continued, looking directly at me, to identify areas where we can modernize and streamline. I expect full cooperation from everyone. After the meeting, Terrence pulled me aside in the hallway. Garrett Finch, the same Garrett Finch who tanked the Atlantic Corridor project, who got Atlantic Pharma Distribution slapped with an FDA warning letter. The same one. And they're putting him in charge of restructuring our operations. Yep. Terrence stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Dom, my man, please tell me you have an exit strategy here because this is going to go bad for anyone who stays on this ship. I didn't answer because I didn't have one. Not yet. 2 days later, Garrett called his first implementation meeting. I wasn't invited. Found out about it from one of my regional managers who'd been specifically instructed not to tell me about the new meeting structure. The next morning, I discovered Garrett had recommended eliminating our backup temperature monitoring protocols, the redundant systems I designed specifically to catch equipment failures before they caused product loss. He called them duplicative overhead and legacy inefficiencies. I walked straight to Victoria's office. Her assistant tried to stop me with some excuse about her calendar being completely full for the day. I walked past her anyway. Victoria looked up from her computer with annoyance. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have a serious concern about the consultant you hired recommending that we eliminate safety protocols that have saved this company over $3 million in the past 4 years." Her expression didn't change. Garrett is a highly regarded professional. His recommendations have been thoroughly reviewed and approved by the board. His recommendations are going to result in spoiled pharmaceuticals and potential lawsuits. That's your opinion. That's my 12 years of experience preventing exactly the kind of disasters he's about to cause. She smiled. "Speaking of your experience," she said, leaning back in her chair, "I've been meaning to discuss something with you. Given your ongoing resistance to the compensation adjustment and your apparent inability to work collaboratively with Garrett, I think it's time we formally transitioned your responsibilities." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning your position will be eliminated effective in 30 days. We'll offer a modest severance package, of course, 2 weeks' pay, and we'd expect you to help make the transition to Garrett smooth during that period." 2 weeks' pay. And they wanted me to spend a full month training the guy who was going to dismantle everything I'd built. Training him for free. I looked at her and felt something click into place. "I'll have my response by end of day." I said, "There's nothing to respond to. This is a notification, not a negotiation. So, was your salary cut? And yet, here we are." I turned and walked out. I didn't resign that day. Instead, I went home and got to work. Jules found me at the kitchen table with my laptop at 11 p.m. surrounded by notes and printouts. "You're finally job hunting. Should have started weeks ago. Better late than never. What are you looking for?" "Anything in cold chain pharma that isn't run by sociopaths." It's a shorter list than you'd think. The first week was brutal. I sent out 14 applications. Got 3 responses. 2 were automated rejections that arrived within hours of applying, which meant my resume never reached a human being. 1 was a phone screen that went nowhere because they wanted someone willing to relocate to Wisconsin immediately and I wasn't willing to uproot Jules from the life we'd built. Week 2 was worse. I expanded my search to adjacent industries. Considered roles I was clearly overqualified for. Started questioning every career decision I'd made in the past decade. The silence from applications was deafening. Every day checking email and finding nothing but spam. Every night lying awake wondering if I'd made a huge mistake by walking away from a guaranteed paycheck, even a reduced one. Jules kept her promise about extra hours at the clinic where she worked as a medical assistant. She'd come home exhausted at 8 p.m. and still ask about my day. Still find ways to make me laugh when everything felt hopeless. "At least you're not getting rejection emails that start with, 'Dear valued applicant,'" she said one night. "That's when you know they really don't care." Small blessings. I started to doubt myself during week 3. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I was just an expensive leftover from a previous era. Maybe 12 years of expertise didn't actually matter to anyone except me. The doubts crept in at 3 a.m. whispering that I'd overestimated my value, that I'd been foolish to walk away, that I'd let pride wreck everything I'd built. Then Terrence called on a random afternoon. "Yo, you still looking?" "Every day getting nowhere." "Good, because I just heard something that might change that. You know, Danny worked with us back in 2015, the guy who always had snacks in his desk drawer. I remember Danny, supply chain analyst, sharp mind, left Polaris for a better opportunity, and we'd lost touch like you do with work friends who move on." "Yeah, I remember him. What about him?" "He's at Vertex Pharmaceuticals now. Called me yesterday about something else and happened to mention they're building a new cold chain division from scratch. Posted the job this week. They're specifically looking for someone with multi-hub experience, someone who understands temperature-critical distribution at scale." Vertex, one of the fastest-growing specialty pharma companies in the country. I'd followed their expansion for years, watching them grow from a regional operation to a national player. Here's the thing most people outside the industry don't realize. Polaris was a third-party logistics provider. We handled cold chain distribution for pharma companies who didn't want to build their own networks. Vertex had been one of those clients for years, but now they were done outsourcing. They wanted to build their own in-house cold chain operation. The moment they did that, they stopped being a customer and became a direct competitor. Every contract they pulled in-house was a contract Polaris lost. "Where'd you hear this?" "I told you, Danny. He said to tell you that if you're interested, you should apply fast because they're not going to wait around." I applied that night, tailored my resume. Heard nothing for 8 days. Started losing hope again. Started thinking about backup plans that felt more like surrender. Then the email came. They wanted a phone interview. The phone interview lasted 45 minutes. Real questions about real operational challenges. 3 days later, they wanted a video interview. 2 hours with the VP of supply chain and the head of their distribution planning team. More technical questions, more scenario planning, more opportunities to explain how I thought about problems. A week after that, they flew me to their headquarters for an in-person meeting. 4 hours with 3 different executives who actually listened when I spoke, who asked follow-up questions that showed they understood how complicated this stuff really was. If you had to design a redundant monitoring system for biologics transport, their VP of supply chain asked toward the end, what would be your top 3 priorities? I talked for 20 minutes, drew diagrams on their whiteboard, explained the failure points most systems missed, walked them through the predictive models I developed at Polaris and how they could be improved with better data infrastructure. When I finished, the VP looked at his colleagues. Dominic, he said, I'm going to be straight with you. We've interviewed 11 people for this role. You're the first one who actually understood how complicated this is. The first one who talked about prevention instead of just response. They offered me the job 3 days later. Vice President of Cold Chain Operations. Salary 35% higher than what I'd been making at Polaris before Victoria's cut. Full authority to build their national network from scratch. A leadership team that specifically said they wanted expertise driving decisions, not spreadsheets. I told Jules that night. Her eyes shined. You did it, she said. We did it. You kept us afloat while I figured this out. That's what we do. The next morning, I walked into Polaris for the last time as their operations director. My resignation letter was already printed. 2 weeks' notice as required by my contract. Victoria's assistant tried to stop me from entering her office. I walked past her again. It was becoming a routine. Victoria looked up. Her expression flickered when she saw the envelope in my hand. What's this? My resignation. Effective in 2 weeks. For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria looked genuinely surprised. You're resigning now? I've accepted a position with Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Vice President of Cold Chain Operations. I'll be building their national network from the ground up. The color drained from her face so fast. She knew Vertex. Everyone in the industry knew Vert.x. They were the future of specialty pharma distribution. We can discuss the severance terms. She started. I don't want your severance. I want to complete a professional transition and leave. That's all I want from Polaris. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the crack in her armor. Fine, I assume you'll cooperate fully with Garrett during the transition. I'll document everything he needs to know. Whether he can actually understand it is a different question. I walked out without looking back. My phone buzzed minutes later. Terrence, Victoria is already in damage control mode. Garrett has no idea what any of your systems actually do. I replied, that's about to become very obvious. My 2 weeks at Polaris felt like watching a slow-motion car accident. Every day brought new cracks in the foundation. New evidence that the people left in charge had absolutely no idea what they were doing. Day 1, Garrett eliminated my temperature alert redundancy system. Called it a cost savings win in his daily report to Victoria. Nobody noticed the backup monitoring going offline. Day 3, a refrigeration unit failed at the Kansas City hub during an overnight period. Without the backup alerts, the failure went undetected for 6 hours. By morning, $62,000 worth of specialty medications had to be destroyed. Garrett blamed outdated equipment in his report to Victoria. Nobody mentioned that the outdated equipment had been working fine for years with proper monitoring. Nobody connected the dots between his system changes and the failure. Terrence called me from the Memphis floor that afternoon, frustration obvious in his voice. Garrett is walking around asking everyone why no one noticed the temperature spike. I told him it was because he got rid of the system that would have caught it. What did he say? He told me that's not how monitoring systems work. I asked him how they do work then. He said he'd circle back. Terrence paused. He's never going to circle back, is he? He has no clue what circling back even means. He doesn't even know what questions to ask. This is bad, Dominic. Really bad. People are scared. The regional managers are all updating their resumes. By day 5, the damage was spreading past isolated incidents. 3 carriers were threatening to terminate their contracts because the new scheduling system Garrett had implemented kept sending incorrect pickup times. The coordination I'd spent years building was falling apart in real time. Temperature logs weren't being filed properly, which meant FDA compliance documentation was falling behind. Danny called during week 2 to check on my start date at Vertex. I told him about the chaos at Polaris. So, you're telling me, Danny said slowly, that they hired a guy famous for wrecking cold chain operations to restructure their cold chain operations? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And they cut your salary because they thought you were too expensive. 20%. Danny was quiet for a moment. You know what this reminds me of? It's like firing the pilot mid-flight and asking the guy who sells pretzels to land the plane, and the pretzel guy is confident. That's the scary part. That's a solid comparison. The day before my last day, Polaris's biggest client, A hospital network that accounted for nearly 15% of monthly volume, called an emergency meeting with Victoria. Their shipments had been late or improperly documented 3 times in the past week. They were considering pulling the entire contract. I heard later that Victoria spent the call blaming market conditions and temporary transition challenges. The hospital network put Polaris on a 60-day probation period with specific performance benchmarks. If they missed even one, the contract was gone. My last day was quiet. I cleaned out my desk. Terrence found me as I was heading for the exit. "This is wrong, man," he said. "You built this place. You built everything that actually works here." "I built the systems. The systems belong to the company now. But the knowledge," I tapped my head, "that goes where I go." He left, but there wasn't much humor in it. How long before the whole thing falls apart? Depends on how many more brilliant ideas Garrett comes up with. My guess, serious problems within 8 weeks. Major crisis within 12. It took 9 weeks into my role at Vertex. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Turned out to be Owen, Victoria's CFO. His voice sounded strained in a way that would have been satisfying if I was the kind of person who enjoyed watching people drown. "Dominic, I know we didn't leave things on the best terms, but Victoria asked me to reach out about a potential opportunity." I let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "We've experienced some coordination challenges," Owen continued. "The board is concerned. They're wondering if you'd consider returning in a consulting capacity. Help stabilize operations." "Consulting capacity. We'd offer competitive rates." "Very competitive." "Owen," I kept my voice level. "You cut my salary by 20% because you thought I was overpriced. Then you eliminated my position entirely. What exactly has changed?" Long pause. "The situation has gotten more complicated than we expected." "You mean the $8.4 million in operational losses?" I kept my voice level. "Owen, I've already heard what's happening. Between a couple old contacts and that FDA warning letter being public record, it's not exactly a secret. 6 carriers walked. 3 hospital networks pulled their business. Everyone in the industry is talking about it." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I'm going to pass," I said. "But I genuinely appreciate the irony of this phone call." I hung up and went back to building something new. At Vertex, things were different in ways I hadn't expected. I had a team that actually wanted to learn. A leadership structure that valued expertise over politics. When I suggested redundant monitoring systems, nobody called them duplicative overhead. When I flagged potential failure points, people took notes and scheduled implementation meetings. When I disagreed with an executive decision, I was thanked for the input. It took some getting used to. The first few weeks, I kept waiting for the catch. Kept expecting someone to tell me my ideas were too complicated. Kept bracing for the dismissive corporate smile that meant my input would be ignored. Instead, I got real questions from people who wanted to understand, who valued expertise instead of treating it like an inconvenience. Denis had become a regular collaborator. His supply chain analysis work complemented my operations planning perfectly. We'd work late sometimes, stress testing scenarios and building protocols that would actually hold up under real-world pressure. The kind of protocols I'd been trying to build at Polaris for years, but kept getting shot down on. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Danny said during one of those sessions around week 6. "The pretzel guy, still trying to land the plane, still pushing buttons, still completely confident, still wondering why nothing's working the way the manual says it should." He shook his head slowly. "I heard through some contacts that Garrett quit last week. Apparently he blamed everyone but himself and moved on to wreck some other company's operations." Terrence gave his notice at Polaris 2 months after I left. The environment had become unbearable. Every day was putting out fires that shouldn't have started. Every meeting was explaining obvious problems to people who didn't want to hear solutions. He called to ask if Vertex was hiring. "Send me your resume tonight," I said. He started 3 weeks later running distribution operations for our entire Southeast region. Same responsibilities he'd had at Polaris, but with leadership that actually listened when he raised concerns. Meanwhile, Polaris was hemorrhaging. Their quarterly earnings showed $8.4 million in operational losses. Spoiled inventory, emergency freight, contract penalties, overtime, and client chargebacks. It stacked fast. 6 major carriers had terminated contracts. Not one region. Multiple lanes across the map. Once the first 2 big carriers bailed, the smaller ones followed like dominoes. The FDA issued a warning letter that became public record. 3 hospital networks representing nearly 30% of their client base pulled their business. 6 months after joining Vertex, our cold chain network went fully operational. On-time delivery exceeded industry averages by 12%. Temperature compliance hit 99.7%. We onboarded 3 major hospital clients who specifically cited our reliability and safety protocols as the deciding factor. The Vertex CEO mentioned during a company town hall that our operational improvements had positioned the company to capture significant market share from struggling competitors. He didn't name Polaris specifically. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room understood exactly who he meant. Danny found me afterward in the hallway, grinning. "Dude, you basically got a standing ovation without anyone saying your name. That's like stealth recognition. It's the team. I couldn't have built this alone." "Sure, but the team doesn't exist without your systems. Take the win, man. You earned it." Jules and I had Terrence and his wife over for dinner that weekend. She thanked me for getting him out of Polaris. "He was coming home miserable for months," she said. "Now he actually talks about his day like he enjoys it." The granola bar ratings continue at Vertex. Terrence confirmed with a grin. "Though the crisis frequency has dropped a lot, I had to rate a training simulation last week. 4 out of 10. The snack bar selection at headquarters is genuinely disappointing. Honestly, Victoria did me a favor. She thought she was cutting costs. What she actually did was cut me loose from a place that didn't deserve what I brought to the table anymore." Jules squeezed my hand across the dinner table that night. She didn't need to say anything at all. We both knew we'd made it through to the other side. The mortgage was current again. The savings account was rebuilding. The anxiety that had kept us both awake for months was finally fading. Terrence raised his cup of coffee to new beginnings. And to whoever invented the granola bar, I looked around the table at the faces of people who'd stuck with me through all of it. I figured that was finally the end of it. Update. 7 months later, 3 months after I started at Vertex, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, little brother. Heard that you landed somewhere good. That's great. Really happy for you. Listen, things have been tough at the dealership. Market's brutal right now. I was wondering if you might be able to help with a short-term situation, just a loan to get through this rough patch. Wade asking me for money." I read that text twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The same Wade who'd mocked me when I asked for help. Who said Jules would leave me? Who laughed while I was drowning? Now he was the one underwater. And somehow he thought I'd throw him a rope. I deleted the text without responding. Blocked the number for good measure. 4 months after that, on a Saturday evening, the doorbell rang. Jules was in the kitchen making dinner. I was half watching some game I didn't care about. Neither of us was expecting anyone. I opened the door. My mother stood on the porch. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "Dominic." "Hey, Mom." Neither of us moved to hug. That wasn't how we did things. Maybe it never had been. We stood there for a long moment. "I know we haven't talked." She started. "Wade was out of line that day. I should have stopped him, but you didn't." "No, I didn't." She took a breath. "The dealership is in real trouble. Wade made some bad investments. Extended credit to people who couldn't pay. Took on debt he couldn't handle. The bank is threatening to foreclose. I leaned against the doorframe and you're here because you need money. I'm here because you're my son. Because I should have been there for you when you needed help and I wasn't because I don't know where else to turn." Jules appeared in the hallway behind me. Just stood there letting me know she was there if I needed her. I looked at my mother for a long moment. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Her face brightened. "But understand something first." I kept my voice level. "When I asked you for help, I was asking for a loan, breathing room, and Wade used it to mock me. Said my wife would leave me. You sat there and watched." "I know. I should have. I'll think about it. That's all I'm promising." She nodded. "That's more than I deserve." "Yeah, it is." She turned to leave. Stopped. "Your father would have been proud of you. The career you built on your own terms." I should have said that years ago. I watched her walk to her car and drive away. Some chapters end quietly. Some end with people showing up on your porch asking for what they refuse to give. Either way, what matters is who's beside you when the door finally closes. I got lucky there. Really lucky. Everything else, I earned that the hard way and I do it all again. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.